not quit.
Microsoft PowerPoint. I don't know.
Quit.
I don't know. It is Microsoft on Apple's computer. Hello, welcome to behind the scenes of AV Rant. We're here. We're recording this on a late Tuesday night. This is behind the scenes, so you will not be seeing the images that we talk about. However, if you're on YouTube, click the show more in the description thingy there, and there is a pictures shown in this episode link. It'll just take you to Flickr, but yeah, if you want to see the images we're talking about, that's where they are. That's a way that you can do it. Click on that link over at Flickr. This is just Google Hangouts, so things might cut out. That's your warning. This is behind the scenes. It's live. And if you want a cleaned up version where Tom and I are side by side and the images show up in the video, then look for the completed video version. That'll go up sometime this week, probably Thursday. That should be that. There you go.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Things went awry this week. We're recording late on a Tuesday night, which is unusual for us, but hey, we're going to get the podcast out. Lots of questions.
Yeah. We're going to see how many questions we get through. Okay, sneezing alert.
Okay.
If you are like a sympathetic sneezer, grab some Kleenex. It is allergy season, and I have got them. Bad. My middle son was sick today, or last night. He woke up at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock and came up and said, Daddy, I'm going to throw up. I'm like, well, don't tell me about it. Tell me
just
after.
do it and let me discover it later.
Yeah, well, don't let me discover it on the floor. What is the deal with this cable?
I don't know.
Whatever. I don't know what's going on over here. Did you contact Todd?
Todd? No. Why would I contact Todd?
I just got that email today. I'm a very busy man.
That wasn't on me.
Well, I don't know. You sent an email to me. I figured you might have sent it to the other guy, too. Who was it?
Forwarding everything to everybody.
Oh,
it's my job. Jeez, all right. Well, there you go.
I just got it today. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've been busy, so I am sorry. I'm also I hate saying this because there's people who are actually cold in this universe. I know that they exist. But because of the way that things have been working in this house, my wife decided that she was going to go to the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which on Wednesdays they feed the homeless. And so she was cooking a bunch of stuff until like almost 10 p.m. So the oven's been going since about 6. So the house is a bajillion degrees.
Right.
And no one's going to turn on the AC because it's the winter. And it's actually cool in Florida for the first week in like forever. So, I'm in here sweating. I'm literally sweating.
I guess this is technically like the last day of winter, isn't it? That's
technically it is, but in Florida we missed it. We did not have winter this year. We decided to just have sort of a mildish fall that kind of hovered around, and then we went into spring a couple of times and came back down. But
well, hey, now your seasons are going to be flooded and not flooded, so that'll be good.
Pretty soon it's just going to be flooded.
It's just going to be underwater.
This is going to be underwater. All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you do is ask. You ask by email us at question@avrant.com. You can find us at www.avrant.com, where you can leave comments. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our videos and very soon not comment on them, because I think we should just disable them and just beat YouTube to the punch.
That is definitely a possibility.
Send them over to Facebook, or just send them over to our website or something. Just put, for comments, feel free to go to our website, which is
well, I'd rather relegate those type of comments to YouTube, so that's fine. They can live there in infamy.
YouTube.
Yep.
Contact Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is at @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. All right, so we want to thank our listeners of the week. If you become a listener of the week, you have to support the podcast in some way. Of course, we want to thank the people who have gone to www.avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, where you can go to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Taylor, Joseph, and Daniel for doing that.
I think it's Tyler, because there's no A in there. But I'm going to say Tyler, Joseph, and Daniel. Thank you very much for the donations. We appreciate it very much. I wasn't expecting any this week because we got, a bunch last week. But, that was cool. Like that.
I didn't check the dates. Would have been like the 12th or whatever it was. So Tyler, yes. Tyler, I'm sorry I messed up your name. It's 10:22 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I went to CrossFit this evening, and it was a hard one. So I am I'm sitting down, and getting up will require a bit of grunting. I'm not going to be honest with you. And this last weekend, I did a Savage race. So with my 13-year-old son turned 13 on Sunday. So there's a Savage race, which is like 7 miles or 5 to 7 miles or something. I don't know what it is. And the Savage Blitz, which is the shorter version, is 5K or about 3 miles. Okay. A little bit more than 3 miles. So the Savage Blitz, which was on Sunday, the youngest you can be and do a Savage anything other than Savage Junior, which is ridiculous. It's like for toddlers. It is I'm not even joking. Like their warped wall was no higher than 3 feet tall. I mean, it was knee high. It was very funny. They had all these little kids and those little soft little moccasin booty things doing it. It was hilarious. But like one of the obstacles was bubbles.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Savage Race Junior. So know, 13 when he was 12, he was not interested in doing that, but he turned 13 on Sunday, so St. Patrick's Day, and that made him old enough. So him and his friend and I all did the Savage Race.
Gotcha.
So I am still walking.
Yeah, you made it here.
I made it.
I saw you walk into the room and sit down, so that
I
much
did
worked.
not. I did not fall on a single obstacle that you weren't supposed to fall on. I mean, I completed all the obstacles without needing any help of any kind.
Cool.
So very good. We also want to thank our 84 patrons at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can become a sustaining member of your content creator of choice or creators of choice. So that means that every month, Patreon will take some money from you and give it to your content creators that you choose in the amounts of money that you designate. Minimum is $1. The maximum is infinity. We're still looking for that infinity dude or gal. Let's be honest. We'll take either. We're gender neutral when it comes to our donations. So thank you to our 84 patrons.
It's like a voluntary subscription. So if you'd like to sign up, it's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. And thanks very much to our 84 patrons over there.
And Todd, I will be sending your email, your address along to
James.
James. That's right.
Yeah.
It's going to be
who clarified that you at one point said his house was a house of cards because he had a gazillion subwoofers in a room, and you're like, yeah, it's all going to come crashing down. He's like, yeah, I downsized to 2, and it actually sounds more even than it did before. So there you go.
That makes more sense. That makes more sense.
Getting there. Little by little, the details will eke out.
We'll get a house of cards guy. We got to come up with a better name. All right. We also want to thank Fred. Fred talked us up to SVS. So if you can't support the podcast financially, which we totally understand, if you support us in some way, just let us know. Fred talked to SVS when he ordered some Prime Elevation speakers and SoundPath subwoofer isolation feet. He wanted to give SVS a special shout out since he didn't order the optional ceiling brackets for his Prime Elevation speakers when he made the original purchase. He just moved, and now suddenly he's like, oh, I should have gotten those brackets. So his address is different than his original order, but SVS made it all easy. They just asked for his new address, and they said I guess they're sending along the ceiling brackets at no extra charge. Thank you very much.
That's great. That's awesome. We always love to hear that happy customers and good customer service. So thank you, Fred, for talking us up to SVS, and congrats on those purchases.
Yeah, RBH. So RBH, I ordered those. Did I talk about this? The Bluetooth headphones, and one of them stopped working.
Oh, wasn't that like back at Christmas or something like that?
Yeah. So I ordered those at Christmas, but one of my sons doesn't really use his, so he goes to use them and they won't work. And my son, who does use them all the time and is familiar with them, he can't get them to work either. So I call RBH. They're like, yeah, no problem. We'll just, we're going to send you some new ones, and then we'll send you an email with some instructions on what to do with the old ones.
Okay.
So the old instructions were put them back in the box that we just sent you, and then send them back to us at your charge. And I went, yeah, I'm not really going to do that. So they're in the box. Yep. I've followed the instructions all the way until the point where I was have to pay for something. I'm like,
pay for return shipping.
I'm not paying.
Shouldn't be that expensive. They're not very heavy.
They're not, but the box is not. It's like the size of a hardbound book. I mean, I'm sure this is the postal service we're talking about. It's not going to be cheap. All right, in the news, Jason and Ted, this comes from. Researchers at Boston University demonstrated that 3D printing acoustic metametal that can allow
metamaterial,
that's what I said, can allow, I am going to be scanning this. This is the first time I've seen these. Rob finished them.
Yeah, barely this morning.
Barely this morning.
We've both been very busy over the weekend, so yeah.
So, yeah. I did a Savage race. What's your freaking excuse, Rob?
Oh, I got many things going on, man. I'm moving relatives into care home facilities.
That's right. Yes.
And it was birthdays, celebrations on Monday, which is why I couldn't record yesterday. So it's all going on.
Was it your birthday?
No. It was nephew and my dad.
No, whatever.
Belated for both.
All right, acoustic meta material. I almost said meta metal again.
Yeah, you did.
I like meta metal a lot better than meta material.
It's not metal though.
That would be better if it were.
I guess it could be.
Anyways, that this meta material can allow air to flow through a ring-shaped opening. The jokes write themselves. But 94% of the sound is reflected back to its source. So text descriptions say it can work with white noise, which should mean it reflects and effectively blocks sounds at all frequencies. But the video demonstration of it being placed on one end of a pipe while a fan blows from the other end and a speaker is playing from inside the pipe is only a single tone being blocked. So there's only one tone going on.
They played like a sine wave, and with the little ring not on the end of the pipe. So they have the fan is blowing and the air is going through no matter what.
Yeah.
You can have the air coming out of the end of the pipe, but you put this ring on the end of it, and then that tone, like, more or less completely disappears. You can hear a little bit of the whoosh of the air coming through, though. So it wasn't like literally blocking all sound, but it was very effectively getting rid of the one sine tone they were playing out of the speaker inside the pipe. Very effectively. So. Yeah.
So there's been some editorial comments about it blocking all sounds. Those might be a bit exaggerated or speculative at best. But the researchers themselves talk about being useful for HVAC systems, drone propellers, and maybe even jet engines, things that create steady noise and need to allow air to flow through, which makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense that it would be metal. So then we could go back.
Well, for a jet engine, yeah.
Jet engine has got to be metal.
Looks like 3D printed plastic is going to last on the end of a jet engine. Yeah. But so, yeah, I mean, some people were asking, like Ted was like, he's like, how is all this work? And I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like a similar concept to like a Helmholtz resonator, right? Except that at much higher frequencies, which is difficult to do because those are directional and much shorter frequencies. It's more difficult to have something resonate perfectly out of phase to cancel that out the way a Helmholtz resonator does for a bass, but I believe it's that type of concept because it looks as though it's taking the vibrations of whatever tones that it has been designed to reflect, and it will sort of, vibrate these little, it's almost like a helix shape, and that'll vibrate in sympathy with that and effectively cancel the noise from going in one direction while reflecting it back the way that it came. So
in theory, whatever the sound of the jet engine generally is, you would hear the engine come up. They would make sound all the way up until it got into that range, whatever that range was.
Yeah, whatever the steady noise is.
You could kind of see that they might be able to take this, whatever this thing is, and have different parts of it resonate at different frequencies so that you could get like a range that it would work in. But
so I mean, this could go maybe on vacuum cleaners or something like that. There's a lot of things where this could make a lot of sense. If it's not tremendously expensive, well, why not? Quiet the world down a little.
Yeah. Where do I put it on my kid's face?
Yeah. Yeah, see, I don't think it's going to work for that. I don't think it's going to block everything.
I could just keep shoving them into their mouths until they shut up. All right, from Nathan. JVC and Panasonic announced a collaboration to optimize the way HDR looks on JVC's newest 4K projectors. It's only available when using Panasonic's flagship UB9000 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, which I didn't know existed, but here we are. But that player includes a couple of extra options for its HDR optimizer settings that are specifically meant for projectors. JVC's 4K projectors then have matching auto tone mapping presets options to work hand in hand with the known output levels from the Panasonic player. There's one pair of presets to maximize HDR brightness while sacrificing a bit of wide color, and a second pair of presets to maximize wide color while sacrificing a bit of peak brightness. That's the one I would probably go for.
Yeah.
Both companies claim that a combination of these presets deliver better results than just the HDR optimizer alone or just JVC's auto tone mapping alone. This is a good experiment. I don't know that it's something that we're going to see widely implemented for everything, but it's a good experiment. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I could mention we talked about BenQ's new HT3550 that they announced. That's the $1,500 4K DLP that is one of the first to reach 95% of the DCI-P3 color gamut. So they had a bit of an event over in Europe, and there was a step-up model as well, which will be the HT 5550, something like that. I think it was a bunch of fives in there. But interesting there that they're taking a new approach to HDR tone mapping as well. So it's all in development, this getting HDR to look correct on projectors, coming up with these different ways. But good to see these two companies sort of working hand in hand, being like, hey, we have a way to take what is on the disc and make sure that it always comes out with the same peak brightness no matter what the original disc said. And then JVC says, aha, now if we know what's going to be coming out of the player, then we can really optimize for that. So yeah, good partnership there.
Yeah. So in breaking news, Google announced their Google Stadia.
There's no R.
Stadia.
Stadia.
Stradia. I like Stradia better. Stadia.
Stadia.
Anyways,
like
I saw
but no UM.
I actually saw this come across like there's an announcement like on my phone, and I went to go to the news, and it was all Trump.
Okay.
I kept scrolling down. It was like Trump and Marvel. Like they are dying to give me spoilers for Endgame and Captain Marvel and everything. They are desperate to give me these spoilers, and I'm like, I'm not reading you. I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to read that. I'm not reading any of it. I say spoiler free for Ant-Man and Wasp. It's been mostly spoiler free for Infinity War. I'm gonna make it for Endgame as well, and Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
All right, Google Stadia, their streaming gaming service. They will leverage their many data centers to stream games to basically any screen, as long as it's not connected to an Xbox or anything that was a game system to begin with. Right? My Xbox 360, my Xbox One suddenly is like, well, yeah, not going to do that. They will leverage their. I already said that. At launch, you will want to play on your TV. If you want to play on your TV, only Chromecast devices will work. But Google made it clear that they want to expand to other platforms. They say 4K 60. With HDR and surround sound will be available right from launch. Sure. They make their own controller, and it's highly integrated with YouTube. So
yeah, they even had a thing where they're like, if you're live streaming on YouTube through this thing, then other people can jump right into your game. I'm like, I don't know if that's awful. What professional streamers want.
That's called stream sniping, and we hate it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was really requested by anybody, but anyway, yeah, that's on its way. I mean, Microsoft already has their streaming game thing that they're revving up. PlayStation already has PlayStation Now, so I mean, this is clear. Everybody's coming at this. We had like On Live and a few other systems before that have now kind of gone away or got absorbed by other companies, but they're clearly seeing like, yeah, the idea is you'll no longer have some super powerful piece of hardware in your own living room doing its own thing. It's just like some low-cost piece of hardware that connects to your TV, or maybe, heck, built right into your TV. There's plenty of TVs with Chromecast built in, so that might even work right there. And then as long as your internet connection is fast enough with low enough latency, and they're like, Google is saying they can have lower latency because they've got data centers close to so many locations. So they're hoping that they can have lower latency than someone who's having to, doesn't necessarily have all of those things set up at locations close to residences. So
I don't know.
They're well positioned to do this. They're like 4K 60 HDR at the start. They're like, we're going to have 8K 120 at some point. I'm like, you didn't really need to say that right now, but okay, you do you, Google. You go for it. No idea on what the price will be.
It sounds like they're obviously trying to break into the streaming gaming service.
That's right.
Doesn't really exist, but they are also clearly targeting Twitch if they're integrating it with YouTube. And
very much.
Honestly, after how badly they've ruined YouTube for content creators, I just hope they stay as far away from, because I mean, you guys might not, a lot of the people listening to this podcast might not care, but there's people who made absolute living on YouTube for a number of years, and then YouTube's just slowly basically took all their money away.
Yes, they have
kept it for themselves, and now they've many of those people have gone to Twitch. And as somebody who has a freaking life and can't drop everything every time I get an email notification that a streamer that I may or may not be interested in watching has gone live, I'm like, I'm not gonna. It's 4:00 in the afternoon. What do you expect me to do? I just get out of class. I've got things to do. So please, Google, don't ruin Twitch. All right, because that's how these people are now making their money. I wish they would unruin YouTube, please. But whatever. From comments here, Sean says he loves our show and wanted to confirm that it was the Lexicon. That's right. That put their case around the Oppo Blu-ray player and charged thousands extra. That is the one that I found. You're right.
There you
Thank
go.
you very much. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. I already forgotten I'd said anything about that. Tap has looked into Yamaha's MusicCast system a little further. He just wanted to mention that the $2,700 4-zone rack-mounted unit does provide some additional functionality that you cannot get from just using several individual MusicCast amps or preamps. Only one key difference is that it can be tied into an intercom, doorbell, or surveillance system, none of which I have. And when that type of audio signal is detected, your music is automatically paused, and the intercom, or whatever it is, overrides it. And then your music automatically comes back afterward. So that's a thing that could be important.
I mean, for custom integrators who are putting this into large houses, that type of thing makes perfect sense. So
absolutely, I totally agree.
That's a feature. If you're wondering, like, you could get 4 individual amps that have the same amount of power, and that would cost you $2,000. What is the extra $700 getting you? Well, more integration of those things. Like I said before, that can be expanded to 32 zones, whereas the regular amps top out at 9. So yeah, some extra things you're getting with that rack-mounted unit.
Yeah. Adam has heard us recommend the NVIDIA Shield quite often, particularly for anyone who wants to use Plex. This is about the only standalone box with native Plex app that outputs full lossless audio. But we've also mentioned how if the Apple TV 4K could do lossless audio with Plex, it might be the box to get.
Because it does all the other streaming services really well.
It does.
Netflix and Hulu and all the rest of them.
The native Plex app on the Apple TV 4K won't do it, but there's an app called Infuse that will. You will need to get the paid subscription, Infuse Pro version, but it outputs full Dolby True HD or DTS HD master audio bit streams. And best of all, Infuse already works directly with any Plex server, so it's only replacing the regular Plex app for playback on the Apple TV 4K. So there's another option. How much does it cost?
I didn't see the price there, and it's a subscription, so I think it's an ongoing thing. But actually, what got me more interested in this than anything else is the idea of, well, clearly the hardware is capable of outputting a lossless audio bitstream, that it's not a hardware restriction, which means that at some point, hopefully Plex themselves will get their Plex app working that way, right?
They could probably they may have already been trying to do it, and Apple keeps rejecting it. So
it could be something like that. But if the hardware is capable of doing it, then that's a good thing. What do we got here? Free trial, great. That doesn't tell me what the price is. $9.99 for a year. That's not too bad.
That doesn't seem so bad.
99 cents a month if you want to do it monthly. So there you go.
$12 a year.
I think that's quite acceptable. Cool. So yeah, thank you very much, Adam, because I did not know about that particular app. And if you got an Apple TV 4K and you don't want to invest in another box, but you want to get lossless audio using Plex, there's a great option. So that's good to know.
Great option. All right, let's get to the questions here. Travis added some DIY absorption to his room. 3-inch foam on his front wall behind his TV and a 1.5-inch thick insulation on the back wall behind the seats. The room is open to the rest of the house. It's a 2.1 setup using Motion Series bookshelf speakers with SVS PB12 and SD and a Denon X2000. So he's got one panel that's sort of horizontally placed behind his TV.
And that's foam.
It's foam. It's mostly behind the TV, not mostly behind the speakers.
That's right. Mostly behind the TV, but that's where the wall is. On either side of the TV is like a window and then kind of a recessed area back to his desk. And then behind his seat, he's actually sort of hidden these 1.5-inch thick insulation things. He's got some that are like hexagonal shapes, so they kind of just look like decoration. And then there's one which is actually a printed image on top of insulation, which we love that. That's great because it just looks like a piece of artwork, but it's serving double duty.
So the X2000 has multi-Q XT, but it's old enough they cannot use the Odyssey Editor app. He knows any changes from the new acoustic panels should probably show up mostly in waterfall graphs, but his Denon doesn't provide that. All he can look at are some simplified frequency response graphs of the EQ that Odyssey is applying. He'd like us to help interpret what the before and after EQ graphs indicate to him. Boy, I wish I had looked at any of these questions before we started this podcast, because that's just real hard to do on the fly. To him, it looks as though the overall shape of the EQ graphs has not changed much, but that after adding the panels, it is actually boosting, cutting a little bit more than before. Shouldn't it be less if the panels are helping? Please help him understand. So I'm looking at the before and looking at the after, and yes, it is cutting and boosting it. I mean, in mostly the base area, right around
some cutting. Yeah.
There's some cutting, and I'm guessing that's right around where the crossover is. Just kind of now it's above the crossover.
Right around 100 hertz, 110 hertz, mostly in that. And then in the after, we're seeing, very similar. I mean, so this is what Denon is saying it's doing with its EQ. Right. So this isn't the measured frequency response. Right. This is the EQ that's being applied. And so, I mean, the ups and downs are basically all happening in the same spots. We're seeing in the after graph a little bit more boosting just above that crossover.
The X2000 is able to take multiple measurements, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Up to 8 measurements, 8 different locations.
So, I mean,
spatial averaging.
To me, this tells me that, so his idea is that by adding the room treatments, your EQ should have to do less.
He's thinking it'll flatten the frequency response, the native frequency response.
The reality
of the sound
is that it doesn't. It shouldn't, actually. What it should do is make the frequency response more even across all the seats, which means that your Denon can look at it and say, every seat has the same problem, and I can now cut or boost more based on what I'm measuring at each one of these seats. Whereas before it was like, well, this one has a little bit of it, this one doesn't have any of it, this has a lot of it, so I can only do so much, because if I do too much, the one that doesn't have any of it is going to have a new problem.
I don't want to make the seats worse, so I have to not be as aggressive with the EQ that's being applied.
So I think this is actually a good thing, what you're seeing here. I think that what you're seeing is that your EQ is able to do more to get you to that flat response that you're looking for. Remember, room treatments, what we're trying to do is get evenness, not necessarily, or uniformity.
Uniformity,
so each seat has the same problems, which means your EQ can address it.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the issues with only looking at basically one part of the data. And it is. I mean, this is great. We love this type of question, because to try and interpret this stuff when you're essentially not being given the whole picture, right? You're seeing one type of graph, which is not even really a frequency response graph. This is an equalization graph. This is saying, here's how I was equalizing before, and here's how I am now equalizing afterward. Then you're trying to extrapolate from that. Well, does that mean the frequency response changed in some way? And overall, like we're saying, the shape clearly has not. So this is saying, I mean, the other thing is, what is the likelihood that you put your microphone in exactly the same 8 locations as the first time you measured? And that's probably pretty low, because I doubt that you put really clear laser markers that have never been moved or something like that. So you're probably taking some slightly different measurements, but we're seeing an overall similar shape, which is a good thing. And then, the EQ is now saying, hey, if I'm getting better uniformity across all these locations, I can actually be more aggressive with the EQ I'm applying. If you were to get Room EQ Wizard and a measurement microphone and look at the waterfall graphs, then that would be another piece of data. It wouldn't give you the whole story. Still doesn't give you the whole story at all, but it's another piece of data to help you further understand what the added treatments have done. But I wouldn't expect treatments like these to really make much difference at all in the bass. They're simply not thick enough to be having much of an effect at all in any of the bass. But, some of your higher frequencies in that, you might be reducing some of the echoes in that, which now, remember, Odyssey also does work in the time domain. So if you're not getting that extra reverberation, it can say, hey, I can flatten out this initial frequency response that much better.
Right.
Yeah. That's about it, I think.
I was just looking at the graphs again. All right, Mark. Mark is the fellow who found a deal on a JVC RS67 projector on Craigslist for Andry and Rob. He was happy to hear that we didn't think he made a mistake by buying it. What were we going to say at that point? But yes, we don't think he made a mistake.
No, it's a darn good projector. Yes.
He already had a Sony X800 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, same one I have. No, yes.
No, you got the 700.
700, that's right. And he snapped up one of the last Oppo 203 players, since he already has a Sony X930E flat panel and wanted to try a Dolby Vision. So he should be good on the disc player front. If he decided he wants to try feeding 4K resolution to the RS67, which HD Fury device would he need? I guess it's not a 4K thing.
So the RS67, it can accept a 4K resolution signal, but it cannot do HDR, and it does not have HDCP.
So you need whatever the one is that strips off the HDCP stuff.
Yep, that's all you need. So out of HD Fury's lineup, it would just be the Integral, which I believe is down to $99 now. So that's not too bad from there. You could also pop over to Monoprice. They have an HDCP to HDCP 2.2 to HDCP 1.4 converter as well, which I think is about $50 or $60. It's even less expensive. And that's really all you need, because you would be setting your players to always convert HDR to SDR, so that would already have been taken care of on the player's end. All you're worried about is the HDCP part of it. You're not worried about the resolution, and you're not worried about the HDR, so it's just the copy protection. HD Fury Integral if you're going HD Fury, or check out the Monoprice converter.
Same guy?
Yeah, same guy.
So he bought all of his speakers before he started listening to us. He went with B&W 600 series speakers, which are popular.
Yeah,
pricey. But after listening to us and snooping around his Craigslist, he got some KEF LS50 speakers and a pair of Focal Little Birds to try out as for Heights. Wait, what? So what? What are the LS50s for? The front, left, and right?
His front, left, and right. Yeah.
Oh, then
he's
went
replaced his front, left, and right with KEF LS50s, and he got full cal little birds to pop up high as front
really
heights.
Nice. Anyway, so he likes the KEFs way more than his B&W speakers. If he were starting over, he'd definitely go KEF or full cal. As it is, it will be a slow, gradual replacement process. In the meantime, he has extra B&W speakers on hand, so we expanded his setup to 11 speakers, but he opted for front wides instead of surround back since the back of his theater area is wide open. What do you call that configuration? 7.2.4 or is it 5.2 point something? Well, it doesn't. Honestly, it would be 7.2.4 if he has 4 overhead speakers, but it's not really a configuration. It's really 5.2.4
with front wides.
Front wides.
Yeah. That's what I would call it. It's a 5.2.4 because you have that plus front wides. That's like the additional thing. Yeah.
Rarely have any use.
Yeah, because if you just told somebody I have 7.2.4, they're going to assume you have surround backs. Right. Because that's what normal 7.2.4 would be. So you go 5.2.4 plus front wides. So yeah, that's cool. I'm happy that you're enjoying those KEF LS50 because I certainly would enjoy them. They're very nice speakers.
There's somebody out there right now who's foaming at the mouth to tell us how wrong this guy is about B&W speakers. And to him, this person, I say, first of all, we don't do that on this podcast. We don't tell you you're right or wrong.
If someone had gone the other direction, I'd also be going, great, you found something that you love.
Like. Yeah. So B&Ws are well known and self-proclaimed to have a sound.
Yes,
and if you like their sound in your room, then you will love B&W speakers. But not everybody has that right room or is in love with that particular sound or gives anything else a chance once they get the B&W speakers. So taking this chance, going out and listening to something else and, running the risk of not liking the thing you already spent a bunch of money on or, validating your initial choice. I mean, that's a pretty brave thing. So I really commend our friend Mark here for doing that. So that's great.
And I would assume the next upgrade will probably be the center speaker because you want those front 3 to match for sure.
John has a small spare room, just over 13 feet long, a little under 11 feet wide. He was thinking he would like to use a projector in there, but it can't be a permanent installation. Is there a portable projection screen that we could recommend that he could move in and out of the room as desired? I have and have worked with a number of different pull-up screens, and I just love them. I think pull-up screens are the bomb, especially if you're in any sort of non-traditional setup where you're like not sure if you're going to want to have it. And they end up being something that sits in your closet for most of its life. But when you need it, you pull it out. You're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I have this thing. I have an 80-inch screen that I took to Australia. I lived with that for like the 2.5 years that we were there. It's great. And I think it's Elite. I think it might be Elite.
Elite screens, they have theirs that they call EZ Cinema.
Yeah.
It's the letters EZ Cinema. Perfect for this. I mean, it rolls down into a tube that you can quite easily carry. It's got a handle. And then you just pull a stick up on the back and you pull the screen upward and hook it onto that stick. And there is your screen. They have multiple different EZ Cinema versions. They have some that are tensioned. They have some that are like a scissor lift type of thing.
Yeah, I'd go with the cheapest possible one.
Yeah,
the one with the stick is just fine because most of the time what you end up doing is the stick collapses. Like my stick collapses, just like we're talking about here. It has a little hook at the top, but almost fully extended, it still fits in the case.
Right.
So you can actually get it exactly where you want it to be, and then put the projector up, put the screen up, and then when you don't want the screen to be there, if you're like got a window on the other side, you lower it back down. You put the stick inside the case usually, or even just behind the case would work, and just leave it right there. And people are like, "What's that thing on the floor?" You're like, "Don't worry about it, dude.
Yeah,
it's cool."
But yeah, for Elite's regular EZ Cinema one, the 100-inch size in a 16:9 aspect ratio is under $300 directly from them, and even less on Amazon. If you want the 84-inch size as a step down, that's only $200. So
that's totally the size I would go for.
I think that'll probably do it. I mean, for this room size, I don't think you're probably going to be going much larger than 100 inches. I wouldn't guess that might even be too big.
Get the speakers to these size.
That's right.
To be honest with you, if you go 100 inches, I go 84 and sit closer.
Yeah.
All right, Brandon. Brandon's theater area is part of a larger room, but it's not open to his entire house. Full pressurization might not be possible, although it
might be
possible. Yeah. Although it would require much bigger subs, he suspects, than would normal in his home theater. says you. He has some placement and size restrictions to consider as well. He started with a single SVS PB12 NSDs. If you could fit that in there, you could fit anything in there. And
well, not anything literally, but
yeah. And he added an SB12 NSD when they were on sale. Using the Odyssey Editor app, he looked at the measurements, and there does appear to be a downward slope at the very low end. He's thinking that's due to the sealed sub not playing quite as loud all the way down low, or not playing as low. Period. I think probably that's part of it.
Well, it does extend actually technically even lower than the PB12 NSD does, but it is rolling off, is beginning its roll off at a higher frequency.
Right. Yeah. Neither sub is maxed out on this volume dial, so he'd like to know if a subwoofer upgrade would actually be noticeable and beneficial. If he's going to keep the same placement and size concerns in mind, an HSU VTF2 Mark V could fit. For the SB?
Yeah, so replacing the SB. Yeah.
Do we think it'd be worth it, or should he get rid of both his SVS subs, ignore the size and placement restrictions, and just focus on getting a pair of larger, higher output subs that can truly pressurize his entire space? I mean, what he hasn't said here to us is how he likes the bass in his room currently.
Yeah. I mean, he's looking at a graph and going, I'm seeing it roll off. Well, I must hate that then.
Right. I have a hard time answering this question and saying, I mean, your subs are not turned all the way up to begin with.
Right.
So, do we care that much?
And I mean, I'm assuming he calibrated them in terms of output.
One would think.
And that didn't require having them maxed out on their volume dials. I guess he just wants to see a flat line going below 20 hertz. I guess that's what he has in mind. Which, granted, the only way you're going to achieve that is by replacing at least one of these subwoofers. That is going to be the case if what you see on the graph matters more than what you actually hear when you're watching something. I'm not gung-ho about this because I don't think you really need to do this, but at the same time, curiosity is perhaps getting the better of him, or just wanting to see that super flat-looking graph.
I think he's worried that the SB and the PB are not playing nice together. And that,
sure.
And I mean, there is some validity to that. And we would have said up front, if you had asked us if you should pair those two subs, we'd be like, yeah, I mean, you can.
I mean, in a smaller room, I'd have no qualms about it.
That's right. But this is not a smaller room. So
it's a large room, but it's not completely.
I'm going to put it to you this way, dude. I'm going to tell you right now. I think if you take if you just say in a perfect world where you could get the exact, your own PB sub and clone it.
Right.
You could actually take the exact same sub and put it where your SB1 is right now. I think afterwards you'd be like, it's better,
on occasion, and in the measurement, it might look a little.
I don't think that you'll be able, if there's not like some sort of weird, like huge suck out or huge problem at a very, very low frequency. Even then, I would have a hard time believing that you would notice it on.
Yeah, this will not be a night and day difference. This will not be anything close to that. This will be 10:30 p.m. versus 11 p.m.
Hey, right now, 10:30 p.m. versus 11 p.m. is making a big difference in this whole hot mess that I got going on over
here. Okay, so I have as much as I like the Shure VTF2 Mark V. Please do not take my comment I'm about to say in any way other than saying I really like that sub, but I have a really tough time saying you should spend the $550 or so on that to replace your SB12 NSD and pair it with your PB12 NSD. That to me is such a small upgrade. I'm not going to say it's not an upgrade, but I'm going to say it's such a small upgrade that I have a really tough time doing that, justifying that. In my mind, if you're going to do this and you're just like, I want to see that graph be flat, way down low, then it's upgrade everything time, in my mind. Which means way more money, but it's just like, are you going to spend $550 to barely do anything, or are you just going to go whole hog and get what you actually want? That's sort of where I fall on this.
I think you're right, but at the same time, I still think in the end he's going to go, Most of the time, I can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I know.
You
Well,
know?
I mean, if you're gonna do this, what, get a couple of PC 4000s? You know,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
fit.
You're gonna have subs that are absolutely gonna be able to destroy this room.
Yeah.
And your volume dials will be even lower than before.
Yes, they will.
And yes,
but they'll extend really linearly all the way down.
Oh, they will. You'll be able to look at that graph and say, look at it, goes down to 16 hertz.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, Brandon. That's where I mean, it's one man's opinion, but that's what he's asking for. I have a really tough time. Believe me, I like that sub. Nobody come at me and say, "Oh, you don't like shoe." No, nothing like that. I'm just saying, in this case, that's not the way I would spend my $550. I'd save it until I can get.
This is one of those times.
Bigger.
It's like when somebody buys new speakers and I tell them to get off the internet for 6 months.
Yeah.
This is exactly that. This is exactly that. Like, stop looking at the graphs, dude. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it and be fine.
You have bass that is so much better and deeper and louder than almost anyone else you probably know in your entire life.
You've probably been to movie theaters that don't rock as hard as your home theater does. Yeah. I've been in plenty of movie theaters where I'm like, I cannot believe I just paid. We talked about going to Captain Marvel this last. My wife's like, let's do something fun as a family. Like last weekend, I think it was. And I was like, well, we can go see Captain Marvel if you wanted. I'm like, she's like, well, how much are the tickets? I'm like, well, if we're gonna go to the movies, I ain't going to just any old theater. We gotta go to IMAX. And I looked up tickets. It was gonna be like $90.
Yeah,
for the five of us to go.
Like I'm like $20 a piece, isn't it?
Oh, it's ridiculous, dude. It's ridiculous. And my wife's like, we're not going. I'm like, I know. That's why we have a home theater, so we don't have to do that. They'll just avoid all the spoilers. So he previously asked, this is still Brandon. He previously asked about replacing his current in-wall golden ear surround speakers with different in-wall speakers that might better match with his Ascend Sierra Raw speakers that he's using up front for now. We suggested RBH Visage M414s since physically they would fit nicely into the existing openings, and sound-wise, we said it would be much more neutral compared to the golden ear in-wall, so it ought to match better with the Ascend speakers up front. If I remember correctly, this question was like, I want something different that will fit into the same box.
That's right. So, I have a cutout in my wall, so I want it the same size or a tiny bit larger, because willing to make the opening a bit bigger than the existing one, but it's pretty hard to fill in.
So I just want to make that clear, because I don't want people to listen to this question and say, oh, we only suggested these because of this. I'm like, we were given the parameters, and that's how we got to
But it's also still a choice I would stand by, because RBH is very neutral and Ascend is very neutral, and it all just lined up in a way where I'm like, yeah, that'll work.
No. So he asked, what about RBH signature reference in walls? They use a folded ribbon tweeter, and the sound of the golden ear folded ribbon tweeter is the main reason he had those at first. So would the RBH folded ribbons be even better matched to his Ascend Raw ribbon speakers? Would they be worth it? Are these
as surrounds?
Oh, as surrounds.
As surrounds. And those are not inexpensive speakers.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that this is an expenditure of money that you can feel good about not doing. I don't think you're going to notice it.
It is not going to be a perfect timbre match to those Ascends. And yeah, no, as much as I like those,
I mean, I love them. I mean, those are some fantastic speakers. There's no doubt about that. But can we really? I mean, these are surround speakers. They're in walls or in ceilings or something.
It's going to have to go in wall. Yeah. I mean, so the thing is, if you were going to spend this kind of money, the reason to do it would be to get a perfect timbre match, not just maybe a hair better, but more different than better. You know, so I mean, I would take that, if this is what you want to do, I would take that money and talk directly to Dave and be like, is there any way you can build me an in-wall cabinet with RAL ribbons? Because Dave is the type of guy who might just be able to do that sort of thing for you. Or I would take the money the difference in price you would have spent on these signature references versus the Visage M series and put it on those subs you wanted.
Well, this is an example of looking at the form factor of the speaker and thinking, okay, well, this form factor looks more like this form factor, but therefore they match. The reality is the RALs or the Sierra 2s are what they are, and you're trying to find something that will match them as best as possible.
Yeah,
having something that actually, is as good as the signatures are, actually makes it harder for them to match with something like that Sierra 2s. Whereas, something with a tweeter doesn't extend quite as high. Maybe that has a little bit of a roll off, is a little bit more forgiving, a little softer, whatever. I think actually works a little bit better in this case because you're trying not to notice.
Yeah, as long as it's neutral, you're gonna just be like, that all blends quite nicely.
All blends, right? Yeah. All of a sudden it goes from the Sierra 2s and then back to surrounds, and then suddenly this pinpoint accurate folded ribbon tweeter that or whatever tweeter that's in those
they are a little beamy, those folded ribbons too. They beam a little bit more so than the RALs. Tough for me to say that one. His next question is going to be like, should I ditch the Ascend Sierra RALs and upgrade everything to RVH signature reference? So
that would be fine too.
That would be all right because we like those signature references very, very much.
No one's going to tell you on this podcast that you shouldn't do that. But I mean, at this point, you have speakers you like. If it's really that important you to get perfect timbre matching, then do the thing Rob suggested.
Just get Lunas and put them on the wall instead of in the wall.
Right.
Work.
He's not going to want to do that because he wants to fill that box, that hole. Fill that hole. I can't believe I said that. Rob is much more along the lines of Brandon here, where he's extremely concerned about perfect everything, whereas I tend to err on the side of once I'm in the experience of the movie or whatever, I tend not to care so much about the specifics, what's going on around me and stuff like that. If something's wrong, I'm stopping the movie and fixing it. There's no doubt about that. But it doesn't always bother. I mean, it doesn't always bother me enough. The only thing that really gets me is, of course, Amazon Prime sucking so bad.
Yeah,
I was just trying to watch. I was just trying to watch the Expanse again with my son, and my son was sitting there next to me, and he was like, "The lip sync's off." I'm like, "Don't even get me started."
That's what you get
at the time 12-year-old son looks up at me and says, "The lip sync's off, Daddy." I'm like, tell somebody over at Amazon, because if you can notice it, everyone should notice it.
This is what you get for watching real movies and content instead of just sweeps and test tones and pink noise like me. So
I know.
That's how you notice those timbre differences.
So he's able to get his Harmony remote to command his Marantz SR7011 receiver to use either HDMI out 1 or 2, as opposed to having both HDMI outputs active at the same time. So that's been working perfectly with both his Epson 4000 projector and the Sony X900F flat panel connected. But recently, his Xbox One started cutting out when using the Epson. And when he tried other sources, in case it was just his Xbox, they cut out randomly too. He switched the HDMI connection that runs to his projector to HDMI out 1 on his Marantz, and that seems to work. But HDMI out 2 on his Marantz is having these cutting out issues. It's a 45-foot fiber optic HDMI cable that runs to his projector. It was working fine before, and it still works when it's plugged into HDMI out 1. So is something just going bad on the HDMI out 2 port of his Marantz? He'd prefer to keep the flat panel plugged into the out 1 because that's the ARC port, and he uses which he uses for the flat panel but doesn't need for the projector. So what to do?
Yeah, this stinks.
It does.
Because it does sound
like the HDMI board's going bad. I hate to say it.
Or just the port is coming a little bit loose, because that's all it takes. Sometimes, because I hate that HDMI is just a friction fit, because that is horrible. And when you're thinking this is a 45-foot long cable, is it possible it was just dangling, pulling down a little bit? Just gravity I'm talking about here.
Right.
On that friction fit, it just loosened that port a hair, and like you're saying, it's working, but it'll cut out a little bit. I mean, that to me sounds a lot like what happens when a port just gets a little bit loose. And every once in a while with the heat, because there is heat.
There are cables that actually, they have like a special adapter thingy that makes them like not snap in. But
a lot of HDMI ports, and I believe the Marantz have this. They have the little screw just above, and you can. It's like a plug that's got just a little hook that just hooks into that little screw to keep a more secure connection. I mean, some people also just go in there with a pair of needle nose pliers and just pinch the end of the port.
That was going to be my next suggestion. I've done that before on phones. I've done that before on a number of devices to get them to
this really sounds like that's all it is, to be honest.
Well, it's only, you better hope it is, because the other option is that the HDMI port's going bad, in which case you're
you call Marantz, you get them to service it.
Yeah,
costs some money, but they'll do it. So
Dan has set up MIDI systems using REL subwoofers, and based on that experience, plus what he's been told by REL dealers and the instructions provided, he says that the speaker level inputs were never intended to be used as the sole input. Okay. Instead, the idea was to use a subwoofer output of your AV receiver or pre-pro for the dedicated LFE channel, plus the bass from any speaker set to small, but to always have your front, left, and right speaker set to large and send those two channels via speaker wire to the REL subs. That way, you could always manually blend the subwoofer with the natural bass response of the front, left, and right speakers while still having the dedicated LFE channel as a separate signal, along with any bass management. So the idea was to use both type of connections at the same time for surround sound. And then for two-channel music, you would only be using the speaker wire inputs and running your front, left, and right channels as full range. If we stop to put some thought into it, doesn't that make sense? Nope.
Gonna say nope. Then we'll explain why.
Gonna say nope. No, it does not. But we will go on with your question. He says it has always worked very well for him, and he thinks the new REL subwoofer models that don't have any speaker wire inputs. We just lost it. This guy stopped listening already. I'm sorry. Please keep listening. That don't have any speaker wire inputs was just a money-saving move, an attempt to appeal to home theater crowd as opposed to the two-channel crowd that REL has always appealed to before. So, any thoughts? Yeah, this is a school of thought that is basically it's at this point antiquated to the point of being laughable, and I don't mean that as any sort of insult to you, sir. I just want to put that out there. This is a train of thought that if you should have full range speakers up front.
Right.
And then
that's the starting point of this line of thought, is that the ideal would be to have speakers that can play from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz all on their own. That's the ideal, that most speakers can't do that.
Right.
And therefore, we're going to augment the bass with a subwoofer, but we're going to still attempt to get as close as we can to what we think is the ideal of truly full range speakers. That's sort of the starting point of the thinking, which is where we fundamentally disagree.
And, well, 10 years ago, you were as right as anybody else was. 10 years ago, no one knew where to put the subs in your house. Let's just be absolutely honest. But
it was all trial and error, wasn't it? It really
really didn't know. We really didn't know. And on this podcast, I would say, man, you're just going to be able to put them wherever you can put them in the spots you can put them, and test it and see how it sounds.
And we were doing a lot of the 1/3 of the way along a wall, that rule of thirds type of thing was very popular as advice, but it really didn't work in a lot of rooms. And now Harman has explained why. They did all the
research,
modeling and the actual measurements, and they figured out why and where the sub should go.
Well, I mean, and the whole line of thinking of having the tower speakers right there and your subs right next to them, that's still very popular. You see that in a lot of pictures.
Very much so. Unfortunately, SVS tweets out pictures like that all the time.
Drove me absolutely. Aperion Audio does it like gangbusters. Drives me nuts. They just sent out I just read something on an article that they tweeted or they put on the Facebook, and I clicked on it. It was like the 7 myths of home theater. None of it was about subwoofer placement.
Right.
I'm like, how do you not mention that subwoofers are placed wrong? So, anyways, but the thought here is that you should have full. Let's just be clear here. 99% of the people that have any sort of speakers do not have full range speakers. Even the ones that think that they do not.
Right.
Their speakers do not legitimately play the full range of human hearing. They do not go down to 20 hertz. They do not. Many of them still don't even go up to 20 kilohertz. Sure, they roll off before then. So you don't have full range speakers. Therefore, this thought that you should allow your speakers everything they are capable of doing is not right. But because it doesn't exist. But on top of that, we now know that how bass works and how bass works in a room. If your speakers were full range and you were in a room the size of an auditorium,
sure, or an anechoic chamber,
outside
with no walls,
then having them play full range, and point,
having them standing on top of subwoofers,
or whatever, right, or whatever,
they are co-located,
would be a perfectly fine way to get your bass. That'd be just fine. But we don't live in those sorts of environments. So we live in rooms where bass bounces around like crazy. It goes across your room 2 3 times before it actually finishes one full wave pattern.
That's right.
It's just it interacts with itself, it interacts with the room, it interacts with everything around it long before you really can even start to really register what it's doing. Therefore, we have to place our bass, or position our bass drivers in a place that does the best in the room, and that is not where your tweeter is.
Yeah,
it's just not.
The thinking, the older thinking, and the thinking that is still being described here is more of almost like a top down. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to start at the top of the frequency range and work my way down, and I'm going to have my speakers play as low as they possibly can, and then I'm going to bring the subwoofer in to just bring in that last octave or octave and a half, or maybe 2 octaves, if the speakers don't play very low. That's what the mentality, and I get that. There's logic to that. However, we have now turned that around and saying, no, what we want to do is get the bass correct first. We would actually like to play that bass out of well-positioned subwoofers to give uniform response throughout the room. We would like that to play as high as it can before it starts to become directional and no longer uniform, which will happen at some point because, we're able to hear directionality once you get somewhere above 80 hertz. Often it's actually quite a bit higher than that before we can genuinely detect it, but somewhere in that range. So there's this area between about 80 hertz and about 200 or 250 hertz, which is tricky. It's tricky because we can hear some directionality in that range, but we're still below the room's transition frequency where the room is dominating what we hear, below 200 or 250 hertz or so. So that region can be a little bit tricky, and this is one reason why, in practical terms, manually trying to blend your speakers and subwoofers can turn out well. We're not saying that approach can never, ever work, but we're saying that if your mentality is, I want my speakers to play as low as they possibly can, you're setting yourself up for a difficult time getting good uniformity. So we like to say, let's get the bass as good as it can be, get it playing as high as it can while remaining uniform, and that's where we're going to set our crossover, and we're going to have our speakers come in then, which means we want bass management. We don't want to be doing that without bass management inside of an AV receiver, and we don't want to be setting our front, left, right speakers to full range ever, because we would prefer that they don't have to even play down to 80 hertz if we could do that without getting directionality issues.
Right. And it's, his assertion that he's always had good results with this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying that hasn't been the case. You very well may have very good results with this, but I imagine that objectively, if you had measured the way that you're doing it, depending on the speakers too. If the speakers are cutting off at 80 hertz anyways.
How many seats you cared about too. That's a huge thing. A huge thing is how many seats you if you've only ever set up systems where you cared about one seat, where it is primarily a 1-person 2-channel music system, and sometimes it does surround sound. I mean, if that was the scenario, then that could absolutely be the case. You can have the one subwoofer, one seat. You can have speakers playing lower potentially if they happen to be positioned in the room that works well for that one seat. What we're saying is it's highly unlikely to work for multiple seats.
He's saying that he's always gotten good results, and I think objectively, if you had done it the way that we're saying, which is cross over everything at 80 hertz, send all of it to the sub, position the subs correctly. If you had done it that way, I think objectively you would have better measurements, and subjectively, you probably, because it doesn't sound like you've ever done it. Subjectively, you may agree with those measurements. The science is there. And it backs us up. And, as much as people want to argue these things as some sort of, I've been doing this for 30 years and it's always worked for me. Well, good on you, I suppose. I don't know what you want to tell you. I don't know what you want me to tell you. I had a guy on Facebook just the other day who was like, my daddy always taught me to ride against traffic when I'm riding my bike. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be done. That's the way I'm going to do it. I'm like, your daddy was an idiot, and you're an idiot for not knowing any better about it. But okay, guy, my takeaway is you don't actually ride a bike, because if you did, eventually you would have gotten hit by a car. It's just a matter of time. So that sort of argument doesn't really hold much water with me. All right, let's go on here. Josh says he wishes he had found our podcast sooner. Me too. I don't know why, but yeah. He's been listening for a few months now, and his wife has listened with him. Hey, Josh's wife. How's it going?
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm sorry, has listened with him without kicking and screaming, so he must be doing something right, he says. Sorry, tell you what, man. You stop making
We
your
are
wife do
not
stuff.
tortured. Yay! 5 stars.
Yay! 5 stars. 5-star Yelp review. My wife didn't hit me.
That's right.
5 stars.
We deserve
Hi,
it.
Josh's wife. Hit Josh. Sorry.
Nice.
All right. They have a spare bedroom that they'll be using in a theater. It's roughly 10 by 10 enclosed, and there's one window and a closet. He didn't want to deal with painting the room, so he bought several blackout curtains to basically cover both side walls, which would include covering the window for nearly full light control. And they plan to sit about 7 feet away, eyes to screen, which will leave about 2 feet behind the couch. And his wife has reupholstered the couch for this, so she's on board, although she'd like for him to keep the costs well under control. Well, you have come to the right place.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically about $500 to play with right now. Play with for what? Okay. So anyways, so in addition,
I got $500 burning a hole in my pocket. There you go.
Can't wait to buy that sub. In addition to sorry, Josh's wife, and I don't know why I apologize to her. In addition to the blackout curtains, he's always got the material. He already has got the materials to construct several DIY absorption panels. He was thinking he would hang the curtains to cover almost all the 2 side walls except for the first reflection points, where he would place panels instead. So sort of break in the curtains at those reflection point spots. And then he wasn't sure if he put panels on the back wall as well. What do we think is the best way to approach the panel and curtain placement? Put the panels behind the curtains?
You don't need to put a break in the curtains because the curtains aren't doing a whole lot acoustically. Anyway, most of the sound is going right through them.
Hide them. You only have to cover the you don't have to put anything, any material over the acoustic panels. You just
just put insulation on the wall, and then the curtain goes away. Yeah. If you have enough curtain material to just fully cover both side walls, just do that and have some insulation in behind them at the first reflection points. That'll be every bit as effective. You don't need to put a break in the curtains.
If you got extra insulation material, just shove that behind the curtains too. Just wherever else you could.
I definitely want you to have panels on the back wall. You're only going to be 2 feet to that back wall, so you're going to have some pretty strong reflections, particularly dialogue intelligibility is what we're worried about here. I definitely want you to have some panels on the back wall. So
I do too.
Other than that, I think that's fine.
And now that you have this extra material that you won't be using to cover the current panels you have, you can use those for the ones for the back wall.
Yeah.
So for now, they'll be using a 55-inch 4K TV made by Sharp. Surprised to hear that name. Every time I go to like CES or see the and there's Sharp there, I'm like, you guys still around?
They're still around.
So as he here comes the sneeze. As he said, roughly 7 feet from ISO screen, about 2 feet of space behind the couch. Do we agree with that layout? I mean, for now, I guess it's fine.
I would have you upgrade that screen size eventually. I mean, from 7 feet away, 75 inches is entirely reasonable.
Well, I know. But I was thinking like an 80-inch screen would be great.
It could be
if you're going to do projection. But if you're not going to do projection, 65, 75-inch.
I think in here a flat panel makes a whole lot of sense.
Oh, yeah, I do too.
10 by 10 room. But you're basically like you are essentially 3 feet from the back wall, 7 feet from the front wall, more or less in this 10-foot long room, right? Yeah. That makes sense. That placement is fine. Eventually maybe upgrade that TV because 65 or 75 would look just fine in there.
So, before he ever started listening to us, he bought a 5.1 Yamaha home theater in the box. It includes a RX V379 receiver. I have no idea which one it is. 5 very small speakers and a sub in quotes.
It plays lower than the satellites. That is factually true.
Still can't call it a sub, but you call it a woofer. Without ever using it, he's already thinking about upgrades, including a Denon X1400H dual SVS SB1000 subs and upgraded speakers. With his $500 budget right now, he obviously can't get all that at once. So where should he spend his money first? Receiver, sub, or speakers? And we're getting a single $500 subwoofer be okay. For now, will be okay since this room is small. It's got nothing to do with your room, the size of your room, and the single sub. The dual subs are to make, in fact, the smaller your room, the more important the dual subs are, because it makes the uniformity across the seats more uniform, which in a room this small can be highly dynamic from seat to seat. So, I'm okay with you using the home theater box speakers and receiver.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that receiver, honestly, is entirely fine. I mean, it passes through Dolby Vision and HDCP 2.2 and all that stuff on its HDMI ports. It is 5.1, but you don't need to go beyond that as a starting point.
No.
You know, so I mean, to me, yeah, the first thing I'm going for is a subwoofer out of that. You don't need to replace the receiver right away. The speakers, I mean, eventually, sure, but for now, Yamaha's home theater in a box speakers are not the worst things. They're okay.
And really, in a room this small,
output isn't going to be a problem.
Output's not an issue. So, this is actually kind of nice because it will train you to listen to these speakers for a while. And then when you upgrade, you'll be like, oh my God, I can hear the difference. Yeah. So it'll be nice to do that. Now, I'm 100% behind you keeping these speakers and the receiver, chucking whatever it is that they call a subwoofer. Like, dude, don't even hook it up. Like if you buy another sub, which is what we're going to recommend, the SB1000 is perfectly fine for this room.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect size for this room. The extension will be absolutely fine. You'll get plenty of room gain in a 10 by 10 foot room. I was thinking, could he go less expensive somehow? You're still probably not going to get two for $500.
What's the speed woofer one, right?
The speed woofer, the RSL. I mean, that's what
$350, right?
No, that's $400. Yeah, so it's only $100 left, but
saving a huge amount of money.
But it's a little bit. I mean, he's that much closer to affording a second one.
Will that one go down to like 25 hertz or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's minus 3 dB at 25 hertz. It is ported, so it rolls off fairly steeply. But again, you're going to get plenty of room gain in here. And the SB1000 is minus 3 dB at 23 hertz, so not a tremendous difference there. So, I mean, I would say if $100 is a difference to you, and when $500 is your max budget, $100 is a difference to you. We can get behind the RSL Speedwoofer 10S in this situation to save a little bit of money, and then get two of them as quick as you can.
Right. So he's got a friend who turned him on to our podcast and pointed out that a Fluence 5 speaker package only costs $400. Do we think he should aim for those as his next upgrade? Nope.
I'm going to say no.
No.
Not and the reason really dislike them or something. If you got them, we wouldn't be saying, oh, that's horrible. But I don't think it's a big enough difference between your Yamaha speakers and those to be like, that's where you should put all your money.
Yeah.
It's that type of situation.
I would save a little bit more.
And maybe get some RBHs?
RBHs would be fantastic. In this room, almost anything would be fantastic. I mean, like you could go, if you can't find them anymore, but the Focal, like birds or little birds all the way around this thing would be, or the birds.
I am sad that those are finally gone.
Fantastic.
They lasted way longer than I thought they would, but
the
they're
super birds up front and birds to the side.
He'd
crush this room.
But a bunch of Ascend HTM 200 SEs. They're $300 a pair. But, so it'd be more than this budget for sure. But like those or, the RBH Impression Series, something like that. To me, that's where it's like, oh, that's a clear enough difference and really clear step up from your Yamaha speakers that even though total cost, it's a bit more, it's going to be like, that was worth every penny type of thing. So.
Yeah, this is going to lead them down a rabbit hole. Like you said, this is the problem with RBH right now. And I hate to say this, but it's true, is that they've been very smart. Which is they're like, you can buy our regular speakers or you can get the upgrade. And then once you get the upgraded tweeters, those come from this other line, which we also still have. And but then if you're there, look, we've got folded ribbons on our other ones.
We've got a signature series and then we've got a signature reference series. Yes, each one is a step up. They are,
Yeah, right. We got speakers made of granite. So
before you know it, it's $1,500 each.
It is a bit of a rabbit hole. So I would be 100% behind you going for like prime speakers.
Oh sure,
SBS, well, Ascend, Aperion, if you could find something over there that you wanted. RBHs would be fantastic. Kefs would be good. These are all
of those are in that sort of $300 per pair price range type of thing. That's sort of the price that we're looking at.
So you're going to be looking at about $600. Let's say an extra $200 for the center channel. So you're going to be looking at like $800.
About $800. So we're spending like $800 on a pair of subs, $800 on 5 speakers. That's kind of the price range we're looking at as a really, really worthwhile upgrade.
So do we think he should play around with Atmos in the future or just stick with 5.1? He wants to make sure he makes the very best out of this small setup now and in the future. Well, I actually think you're pretty well positioned for this because if you do what we say, which is subwoofer, then another subwoofer, then start thinking about your
Speakers.
speakers. Then you would upgrade your receiver, and your
Last.
receiver would have Atmos, and you have Yamaha speakers that you could put on your ceiling.
Oh, right. Yeah, you'd already have the home theater box speakers that you could definitely use as
And
Atmos.
those would be just fine for Atmos
Yes,
speakers.
they absolutely would.
It's just
as
Atmos is
speakers.
like Atmos is the job you give to your brother who you're like, he's not really trustworthy, but he'll probably show up on time, and he'll do a half a day's work. That's what Atmos speakers need to be. So that's what I feel
yeah,
like.
no, this is well down the road. Your receiver upgrade is going to be the last thing we're doing, because it's not really pressing. You're able to pass through all the signals that you need to pass through your current one. It'll do 5.1. It'll do 5.2 with a Y splitter. So you're totally fine for the time being. When you do get around to Atmos, and this could be years down the road for all we know, I am going to say I want you to have 4 overhead speakers, because if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. And that means 4 overhead Atmos speakers, not getting a 7-speaker maximum unit that you could only top out at 5.2.2. So, but that's down the road. I don't think you have to worry about it right this second.
Yeah, we haven't even really addressed the whole fact that he's going to have to get a new TV in any of this.
Oh, yeah.
We're just talking about the speakers, in your progression. Now, I'm not saying you need to do all this stuff first, and then you can upgrade your TV. I'm like, upgrade your TV whenever that makes sense to you.
But I think subwoofers first. I think that is the number one thing. Subwoofers.
Yeah, I would go subwoofers first, and then you could pretty much pick and choose what you wanted from that point. I mean, I would either say pick and choose between the TV and the speakers, but
regardless, that AV receiver is going to be the last thing.
Yeah. Damien on Twitter, which measurement microphone to get? U-Mic 1 from Mini DSP or UMM6 from Dayton? How about the one from Cross Spectrum Labs that's already calibrated for you? How about that one?
Yep, and that's going to be a U-Mic 1 right now.
I was going to say, that is the U-Mic 1, right?
They're not doing the UMM6 from Dayton anymore. They do still do the EMM6, which is the XLR version, in case you want to use an XLR microphone instead of a USB microphone. But if you want a USB microphone, we're going to send you to Cross Spectrum Labs, and that'll end up being the U-Mic 1, because that's the USB microphone that they sell. So, easy answer.
He basically takes every individual microphone that he sells. He takes that and then measures test tones with it, and then he compares that measurement to his professionally calibrated and validated professional mic. So he measured, he knows what the professional mic measured, and he knows what you measured. Then he gives you a correction curve for your specific microphone, nobody else's, microphone, that corrects the deficiencies in your mic. So if that mic, measures, 1 dB higher at this frequency, or 1 dB lower at a different frequency, it's going to correct for all that. So its measurements are exactly the same as a professionally calibrated mic. Now, in theory, you should send it back to him every year and have him recheck it and stuff like that. But the reality is you're going to use it so frequently. But it's going to be about as good as you can ever expect for about, what is the premium on it, like $20 or something like that? I think
it's like $105 total or something, or 120 or something. It's right in that range,
And how much is the mic normally going to cost you?
Like $95, I think.
It's like a $25 premium,
like that,
to have this thing done. It's ridiculously cheap compared to what the peace of mind you get. When you take and you're like, oh, I've got my old Radio Shack SPL meter, and there's a correction curve for it, but it's not for it, it's for everyone that ever came out. So you're like, I don't know how this applies to, if this is going to make things better or worse. Well, here
he's charging $105 for a calibrated U-Mic 1.
That's awesome.
Very little upsell.
Mark says, what are the differences between the Denon X4400H and the X4500H? And what about the Marantz SR7012? I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably Helios, maybe?
Nope. Helios is the same. There were very little differences. So the 4500H is IMAX enhanced. Whoop-de-doo.
Doesn't that just mean it does all the things that it was already doing to begin with?
Yeah. Well, it'll say IMAX enhanced when you play an IMAX enhanced disc on it.
It just has DTS Master Audio or DTSX, right? DTSX on it?
DTSX.
The other one could do it too. It just doesn't say IMAX enhanced when it does it.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Well, maybe a nice usability feature if you do want to use the like the overlay. You know, you press the info button and what you're watching is still there, and it just overlays the graphic on top of that. It'll do that on the 4500H at full 4K, including in Dolby Vision, which the 4400 didn't do. That one it would black out what you were seeing to bring up the Denon's menu on the 4400. So that's a little usability thing. The 4500H dropped the analog inputs on its front panel, so it doesn't have like the left, right, and composite video inputs on the front panel.
Oh my
anymore.
goodness! What will I do without it?
Well,
I will have to plug
you have to get the older
into
the older 4400. Where will my Wii plug in? So, but there were shockingly few differences. That was about it. The Marantz SR7012 is exactly the same as the 4400H, except it has 7.1 analog inputs.
That's usually the case with Marantz.
So it is now the SR7013 would be the equivalent of the X4500H plus 7.1 analog inputs. So yeah, that's it. There's very little reason to, if you can get the 4400 for less money, very little reason to avoid it.
I kind of miss the days when we needed 7.1 analog inputs.
Yeah. They both do eARC. The 4400H, it required a firmware update to do it, but it does it now. So yeah.
I haven't checked the firmware on my receiver forever. I should probably do that. Joe K, who I'm going to assume is Joe Kane, because who else would it be?
It is not, but okay.
Yeah. Joe currently has a 7.2.4 set up using a Marantz AV7702 Mark II processor connected to two Marantz MM8077 150-watt amplifiers with 7 channels each.
Mm-hmm.
So he has 14 channels of amplification available, only 11 speakers at the moment. His room is 19 feet wide. And he has a 10-foot wide, acoustically transparent screen mounted on his front wall with some Sonance Cinema Select in-wall speakers behind it. And since he's got the wide room and the extra amplifier channels, he's thinking he might want to upgrade to the Marantz AV8805 and give front wide speakers a try. Maybe Oro 3D2. So
you got acoustically transparent screen up front with black acoustically transparent fabric all around it.
Right.
So that's good, looking good up front. That's an older picture of the front of his room, so it doesn't have the seats and that in it. But also sent pictures of his current seating. He's got lots of seats, lots of recliners in there.
Lots of seats.
He's got some in-wall surrounds and surround backs. He's got some in-ceiling Atmos speakers up above. He's got a nice JVC projector mounted on his ceiling. And this is a wide room. He's got lots of seats. What are there? 2, 4, 6 seats up front and another 5 seats in behind on a riser. So
this is the one that's got the weird little, like I said, it was kitchenette to the right.
Yeah, little kitchenette in the back right corner there. So nice clean looking setup, acoustically transparent screen up front, and that's what's going on there.
So he's thinking about. So that's not a question. That's just a statement.
That's the setup. He's thinking about some front wides.
So one of his Sonance in-wall speakers behind the screen has a busted mid-range driver. So he already purchased 3 Sonance Symphony S623T in-wall speakers. It is possible to angle the tweeters in these speakers. He also has some Sonance Cinema speakers in he's got these things just everywhere, doesn't he?
He's got a bunch of Sonance speakers
in regular speaker cabinets that he has never ended up using since he went with in-walls. His false wall up front is entirely acoustically transparent. It's fabric on either side of the screen. So he's thinking that having the front wide speakers on the front wall would give him the cleanest looking, I guess, behind the front wall. The cleanest looking installation. But he has the ability, with a bit more hassle, to install front wide speakers on his side walls. Or he could put a pair of the regular speakers he has on hand on a pair of stands for more placement flexibility. He was thinking that since he can angle the tweeters of the speakers, maybe he could use those as front wides, keep his Sonance in-wall cinema speakers as his front, left, and right, and use the third of these new ones as a center. But what do you think is the best approach? All right.
I have strong feelings about this.
I'm sure you do, but I'm going to talk about it from a sort of more generalist approach. So the idea of front wide speakers, in my mind at least, is the control of that first reflection.
Yeah, they are producing what would normally be your first reflection point, but like purposely creating sound at that location.
So if you think of where your front speakers are, then where your first reflection point is, that's where your your wide speakers should be placed.
That's correct.
So it's very hard for me to imagine a scenario in which they would still be behind that front wall.
They are not going to be on your front wall.
Yeah.
Not never.
So installing them in the sidewall with an angled tweeter, I think, is a compromise of pretty epic proportions.
Yeah.
So I would not suggest doing that. With the best solution in my mind is that, first of all, tweeter should not be, I mean, I know I've talked about it in the past and saying that, if people want to experiment with it, it's fine. But in general, having the tweeter not be in line with the other drivers is asking for
I hate that
problems.
any speaker manufacturers do that.
It's just like having
want it.
line level inputs on subwoofers. Okay,
speaker level
if they don't, speaker level. If they don't offer them, somebody's going to complain.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of thing. So putting the speakers on stands and putting them at your first reflection points. God, the sneeze is just back there. Is where your wides would be. Do you still want to do this? Because I don't even know why you would spend the money to do any of this. I'll be honest with you. I have no. My suggestion is don't. Basically,
he's got speakers on hand. He's got spare amplifier channels.
I understand
that.
To do? Well, not to buy another flagship pre-pro. That's for sure.
But it's only $4,000, and it can do 13 speakers simultaneously.
Who cares? Who cares? This is literally going to make sonically, in my mind, about as little difference as you can possibly make. To me,
I like front wides. No, I have strong feelings.
You are not the most
this.
Unbiased person.
I am the front wide speaker guy out in the world here. There's not that many of us, but no, they have to go at your first reflection points on the side walls. They have to be angled properly at you, not just a swiveling tweeter. I feel very strongly about that. Furthermore, you got these upgraded Sonnet Symphony speakers, 3 of them to be ear-in walls, with the idea that they be your front, left, center, and right, and they should be. Your front 3 speakers should be identical if you went to the trouble of creating an acoustically transparent screen up front. That's what you should do. So there's no scenario where I have you using these new Symphony S623T speakers as your front wides. Nope, don't do it. Anyway, use the ones that are on cabinets, put them on stands if you're going to do front wides.
All right, so he already has 4 in ceilings, or don't do anything.
Well, other than replacing the one with a busted mid-range, that makes all the sense.
Yeah. He already has 4 in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. He's thinking he could add a 5th as a Voice of God speaker for Auro 3D. That would give him 14 speakers total, perfect for his complement of amplifiers. But the AV 8805 volt can only process 13 speakers at a time. So any issue with having both front wides and the 5 ceiling speakers, will the 8805 switch between them automatically?
It sure will.
Okay.
Yes. Well, on the back of the AV805, the pre-outs that it has height 1, height 2, height 3, and height 4 pairs. Okay. And that height 4 pair can optionally be front wides. So what it'll do is when you're using, because the front wides are only going to be active when it's genuine Atmos, not Dolby Surround Up Mixer, because the Dolby Surround Up Mixer does not use front wide speakers. So genuine Atmos or DTS X or the DTS Neural X Up Mixer. However, the DTS Neural X Up Mixer is limited to using 11 speakers at once. 2 out of those 11 could be front wides, but that means you have to turn off your surround backs. So it's not super simple, but it will always switch between them. And when you are going to Auro 3D mode, that does not use front wides, so it won't be using those pre-outs, and it'll switch over to the, it'll be the height 3 pair, which could be the Voice of God and a center height, if you wanted to do that, which he's probably going to do that. So he's going to be, I have to buy a 15th amplifier. You can totally have Voice of God and front wides, and it'll automatically switch between those based on the listening mode you're using. If anything is going to trip you up here, it's going to be when you want to use DTS Neural X, and you're like, do I do surround backs or do I do front wides? Because if your surround backs are like present in the setup, they will take precedence over the front wides. That's what it'll use. So you have to actually turn off surround backs completely if you want to use front wides.
You see how this is not worth it?
It's a hassle.
You see how it's not worth it to me? You see where I'm coming from on this?
Well, DTS is working on being able to use more than 11 speakers with Neural X. They're working on it. We'll see how many years it takes for it to come.
I don't even understand the idea of even trying to have Auro 3D. I mean, when was the last movie you saw with Auro 3D?
I've never used it.
I've never seen anything offer it. I mean, I don't just watch Marvel movies. I know it sounds that way. I don't just watch Marvel movies. All right, Anaheim Josh. It's not the same Josh as before. It's a different Josh?
Different Josh. We got many Joshes, as has been complained about.
You complain about that?
No, Josh Z complained that there are too many Joshes and he doesn't know when
He's just mad that his last initial is Z and he gets last. Picked last at dodgeball or something. I don't know. Josh from Anaheim is back to get some more advice. Number one, just don't worry. Those fireworks happen like 3 times a night. It's Disney World. Disneyland. Just get over it. As a reminder, he has the large 4,500 cubic foot room with 2 sliding glass doors, one of which never gets used. So his theater gaming area is going to be in front of one of the glass doors and taking up just a corner of the larger room. So I do remember this. There's a sliding glass door, and he's not using it. I scrolled too fast. Initially, he was going to continue using his Silverline audio bookshelf speakers as his front left and right. Since only be sitting 7 feet away, he mostly cares about one primary seat, and he was going to stick with the Phantom Center. And we said to go with the 75-inch Samsung QLED with full array local dimming rather than the 82-inch edge-lit model. Gee, I wonder why we said that. We also said a pair of in-ceiling surround speakers would be worth it since gaming is a priority, but now he just can't stomach having mismatched speakers. Yes, you can. You haven't even tried.
You haven't even done it yet.
You haven't done it yet. Don't tell me you can't do it.
We have a lot of worrying in the mind going on this
week.
I know,
dude. Hey, I'm a home theater professional in here, and I've got, Veris Grands up front. My side surrounds are Emotiva speakers. They don't even make anymore. And my surround backs are Veris Grands because I had them.
You got prime elevation front heights. You've got full-count bird top middles.
I know, dude. It's like Frankenstein up in here. You can't handle it. You can't handle it. You haven't tried it. All right. Plus, it's been decided that keeping all the speakers as close to invisible as possible would be nice. So now he's considering a passive soundbar type speaker up front for his front 3 channels, plus matching in-ceiling surrounds. He had Martin Logan Electro Motion series in mind, but is there anything we might recommend more highly? Yeah, don't do this.
Well, what if he wants a center? We would want a center that matches, and his speakers are older now.
Fine, but he's talking about going with a sound bar, basically.
Well, I mean, not really a soundbar form factor, but it's
right,
still,
I know.
It's 3 speakers built into one bar, basically. I have something I would recommend in mind. If that's what you're going to do, if this is more about looks than it is about anything else.
This is awfully expensive. The Martin Logan is not going to be cheap.
Oh, yeah. But the one I'm going to suggest to you is the one that Kef makes.
Okay.
They have a passive, they have 2 different passive soundbars. Get the bigger one. If you could afford the Martin Logan, you can afford the bigger one. It's the 8003 that Kef sells. About $900 for that thing. But, that's like $300 a speaker, which isn't out of the realm of, normalcy. So yeah, that gives you the soundbar form factor. It is passive one. I like the Kef ones. And if you gotta have matching in-ceilings, Kef most certainly sells in-ceiling speakers. There's lots to choose from in Kef's lineup for in-ceilings. So that'll all work out. If this is just what you're set on doing, I can heartily recommend those.
I do not. Clearly, the 3-channel passive soundbar is not as wide as the distance he would have between a pair of bookshelf speakers. Will he still get good stereo separation? One person will.
Yeah.
Basically. One person will be just fine. Everybody else is going to be screwed. Wow. So, yeah, I'm sorry. That is true. That is basically true. Let's call it spade a spade.
With its coaxial drivers that it's using and all that,
dude.
it's
you're sitting
decent.
on the axis to the left or right speaker.
Yeah.
You're not getting good stereo separation.
Yeah, you do need to be between them. But he mostly cares about one seat. He'll get very good stereo separation in that one seat.
There is no reason to do this. There's just no reason to do
other than not wanting to see his bookshelf speakers anymore, apparently. I don't know.
What's wrong with his bookshelf speakers?
I don't know.
Just put bookshelf speakers
on either side of your TV. I know.
Get Kef bookshelf speakers if this is the direction that we're going. I mean, if you really want to spend this money, just get bookshelf speakers. And if you're just like, but I want to have a center channel, then buy a center channel.
Yes.
Put it on a shelf above your TV.
Those in-ceiling surround speakers is going to make no difference which ones
Zero
you use.
difference.
They do not need to match. They really don't. The placement is so compromised, it'll make no difference. But
The passive soundbar likely won't play as low as bookshelf speakers would have. Wow, another compromise for no reason. The Martin Logan specifies minus 3 dB at 120 hertz, for example. They're probably being generous too. Will that necessitate a higher subwoofer crossover? Yep, 100%.
That one would, yeah.
And will a higher crossover negatively affect the overall sound quality? Not necessarily. It kind of depends on the placement of your, I guess we're now looking at a sub instead of subs.
Yeah. I mean, so the KEF one that I'm recommending, that the larger, the HTF 8003, it claims a minus 3 decibel point of 70 hertz. So that one's no problem.
That was less of an issue.
Cross it over at 80 or 100, no problem. So yeah, yet another reason that if you're going to do all of this, I would go with the KEF.
When you talk about these higher crossovers, what we're really worried about is localization of the subwoofer.
Right.
And depending on the placement of the sub, localization does not necessarily happen at 80 hertz.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't like 79. I have no idea where this is coming from. 80, it's right there. You know what I mean? It's not like that.
No, it's not.
But if the sub is very close to you, then localization happens much higher than you would think, or than when we might tell you, or the data might tell you, because you're physically getting there's indication that something is happening behind you, and that draws your attention, which draws the idea that it's coming from that direction. If the sub is further away from you, then 80 hertz you'll never notice it. 90 hertz probably not. 100 hertz still probably not. Depending on where it is. So that's something to think about as well. It's not a hard and fast. It's a rule of thumb. It's not hard and fast. We know at 80 hertz, unless you're sitting on the dang thing, you're probably not going to know where it's coming from. We mentioned that an SVS SB3000 would be a good choice for his total room size without being too gigantic in and of itself. And since he mostly cares about just one seat, the single sub should be okay. But he doesn't ever plan to listen at full reference volume, and he doesn't need the back of his room to feel the bass. Feel the bass. Just the couch. So could a SB2000 deliver what he needs? Dude, I don't know how you're going to tell the bass not to go into the back of your room, but when you figure out how to do
it's
it,
going there.
Market it, and then sell it to everybody, because everybody who has a theater space wants to figure out how to use those electronic cat gates to keep the sound from leaving the area. So
the bass is going there and back probably more than once before you ever hear it. So there is no, this is not like your speakers at high frequencies where the farther to the back of the room you go, it gets quieter. Nope, the bass is going everywhere. Those 20 hertz sound waves are 55 feet long. And your room, even though it's larger than your theater area, is not 55 feet long. That bass is going everywhere in this room. It's going to be just as loud everywhere. In fact, in some places you might get a resonance. It's even louder than it is in your theater area, even though you're elsewhere in the room.
So getting a smaller sub is just all it's
just
going to do.
Asking the sub to work harder is all you're doing.
To do the exact same thing, especially I mean, if you don't turn it as loud, the bass will not be as loud. It will not be as loud for you. It will not be as loud for the people in the kitchen. It is still going to be loud. It's just not going to be as loud.
So I mean, he's doing about 4,500 cubic feet.
Right.
I mean, an SB2000 is not like you'll have no bass, but it's
you're asking that sub to do a heck of a lot.
You're asking it to do a lot. That's sealed. I'm still on board with an SB3000 as being the correct choice in here.
Yeah. So should he plan on getting a second sub at some point? I mean, I would say
only care about one seat.
Well, it would depend on when he gets this one sub into his home theater and then starts listening to stuff and then says, this is not good. And he tries all the places he can put it, and it's still not good. Then I'm going to say, yes, you need a second sub. But if you get it, you throw it in the corner, you run your whatever it is, and then you're like, oh, that sounds all right to me, then you're fine. You don't need a second sub.
Yeah.
So, but we won't know until you do it.
Yeah. So we wouldn't say plan on it. We're saying it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but it doesn't have to be your plan right now.
Yeah. The storage room that takes up the diagonally opposite corner from this space, from where, well, at least from his theater is going to be, that's just stick framing with a single layer of drywall, very thin walls, as it were. So does that get subtracted from the total volume of air? Does it? Who cares?
If it's closed, I mean, it does. Sound waves, once they hit a different medium, so we're talking air to drywall, most of that energy does reflect, even though the drywall is, it's just one layer and it's just on stick framing, no insulation, not even closed in on the other side. It's still a transition of medium. So most of that energy does get reflected back. Some of it will
even
penetrate.
though, you might end up actually, this thing's going to vibrate like crazy.
Yeah, that's the concern is that if it's not well constructed.
Yeah, if it's just stick framing with, single layer drywall, depending on what the gap is between the different sticks, I guess, you might find that those layers of drywall are going to start vibrating and creating more noise in your room.
Yeah.
So have fun with that. There's really nothing we can do about it. So,
well, you can beef up the wall if need be.
That's right. That's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
Something he could do about it. No, so if he's using a passive soundbar, does the subwoofer have to go directly below to keep the directionality sounding correct? Could the sub go somewhere close to the front of the right corner of the room as a whole, even though his theater area is in the front left corner of the full space? Yeah, dude, you do not need to put this underneath your soundbar. The soundbar, first of all, don't buy a soundbar. But the second, it does not have to, the sub can go anywhere in this room, basically.
I mean, we were thinking just to the right of his front right speaker, because that basically would put the sub in the middle of the front wall as a whole.
Right.
Which usually works out well. That's very often the case. So it doesn't need to go directly below the center speaker. That it doesn't have to go there. You could try, by all means, try the front right corner if that's a convenient place to put the sub. You'll get boundary reinforcement. It'll make that sub seem a little bit louder by being in a corner, and it might work out just fine. So by all means, try it. But I'm thinking basically what is the middle of your actual total front wall. That's where I would expect it to sound best.
Yeah. But if you can't, just put it in all the places you can put it.
That's right. Yeah, give it a try and play sweeps. They'll tell you so much.
Yeah. Rob in Perth. So, hey, Perth. I used to live in Yokine. Anyways, last week we talked about Rob's Dolby Vision issues, where Dolby Vision does eventually pass through his Marantz SR6010 receiver, but sometimes after only cycling the power on his Marantz. We said to try turning off standby pass-through. He was not using it anyway, and he isn't quite sure how it got turned on in the first place. So he gave that a try, no dice. And he's tried changing the order in which his Harmony remote powers things on, as we suggested, but that's still no fix. We mentioned that maybe adding a delay after his TV and receiver are powered on before powering on his Oppo, but there doesn't seem to be a way to do that in his Harmony activities. He can add a delay after all three devices are powered on, but not anywhere in the initial power on commands. Did he just overlook something? I don't know.
No, that one you didn't. You're right about that. When they set up the activities, they automatically send the power on command for everything, and it's only after that you can.
Well, how about this? You could then, after everything's done, send a power off command and then a power back on to the Oppo. Hey, somebody's got to make some sort of mouth noise.
That's right, and it was me. I breathed in the wrong pipe. Yeah. That's actually kind of his very next question. He was like, he could just do the power off, power back on as part of the activity. But he's like, that he only needs to do this power cycling thing when it's Dolby Vision. So he's like, do I really want to have it always, power off and back on for everything else that isn't Dolby Vision when it's not necessary? It's not the end of the world. I mean, you could have separate activities. You could be like, power on for Dolby Vision is a specific activity, and that includes the power cycling of the receiver, and none of your other activities do.
I mean, it's just a separate activity. Literally, just copy paste your first activity and then add this new thing to it, and you're done. I mean, it's just one more button on your Harmony remote.
Yeah,
that's probably
one more activity to choose. It's just I know this is
one going to be weird one. I don't like this one. It is
weird. I don't know why this is happening.
This should not happen.
That's what he's upset about too. He's like, this shouldn't be. I mean, clearly this is not the end of the world, right? This is first world problems. But,
for sure.
But no, I mean, I get it. It's a minor annoyance. You'd like everything to work super slick, and it's
I like the idea of just. I mean, because quite literally, it just doesn't happen often enough for you to really care that much. So going into your devices and just power cycling it manually that is almost certainly what I would do.
Yeah.
If you really care that much, taking your current activity, making another activity and call it Dolby Vision.
Yeah.
and then adding the power cycling of the receiver or the player or whatever it takes to make that happen is fine too.
I think that's the workaround.
Graham has a Plex server, and his primary playback device is a Roku. All right, so I got neither of those things. Let's go. To save storage space, he wants to use Handbrake, but there are a gazillion setting options. Can we make some suggestions for what settings he should use? You don't use Handbrake. You use MKV. Make MKV.
That's right. I mean, so he is as well, right? If he's doing a backup, he's starting with Make MKV, but Make MKV just takes the data off the disk as is.
Right.
Handbrake transcodes things and can recompress it so that you can save storage space. It doesn't have to be a full 30 or 40 gigabytes. You can shrink it down to,
this
10
dude's
or 12.
like totally right too, though. I've used Handbrake before for a couple of minutes when I first got my first iPad before we moved to Australia. I took a bunch of movies and I used Handbrake to rip them off of the disc or whatever it was,
and shrink their
file size, and I maximized them for the iPad. And there was a setting that just said iPad,
right,
for that.
And as it happens, there is now a setting that within the presets that says Roku. So that is certainly an option. I would go ahead and use that. However, there's a couple of things, and this is exactly what he's asking about. There are a couple of things that I would change in there. So I would go into there, go to the devices presets, choose the Roku. Now, I don't know if these are Ultra HD Blu-rays, in which case, of course, you choose the 2160 setting, or if these are regular Blu-rays, in which case, choose the 1080p setting. So that's fine. But by default, it is doing them at 30 frames a second, which, of course, is not most of your discs. Most of your discs are 24 frames a second. So go into the video tab and select under the frame rate, same as source. Because that way it's not trying to interpolate frames that were not in the original. And actually, it saves you a little bit more space because now you're only doing 23.976 frames a second instead of 30. So go ahead and do that. Also set it as a constant frame rate because there's no reason your frame rate should be varying when you're talking about backed up physical discs. As far as the quality goes, it'll default to the setting of 22. Myself, whenever I've done this, I have bumped that. So as the number gets lower, it's actually less compression. So I've almost always bumped that to between 18 and 20. I've noticed...
That's literally 19, by the way.
Well, I mean, sometimes I use 18, sometimes I use 20. So sometimes
you never use 19?
Maybe I have used 19, I don't know, but in the range of 18 to 20. I have noticed that sometimes you get a little bit less color banding, right? I've noticed at the default 22 setting that you quite often get a little bit of color banding, especially like the Columbia logo where the light first comes on in the Statue of Liberty's hand. I always see color banding there, and I'm like, if I set that to 18, it takes up a little bit more space, but usually gets rid of some of that banding, the worst of it anyway. And that's about it, because by default, it'll retain the lossless audio while also giving you a 2-channel AAC down mix, so it'll be compatible with everything. And because you are using Plex will do a great job of transcoding whatever you need. So those would be the settings I'd look at. I'd use the preset. I'd just change the frame rate thing to be same as source. And if you want to, you can maybe, use a little bit more space and choose a lower numerical version on that quality setting. That's about it.
All right. Tyler has an Amazon Echo, and rather than using its built-in speaker, which sucks, he connected its analog output to a small Class D amp that powers a couple of nice speakers, and he loves the results. So now he would like to connect the Echo to his home theater setup, which uses a Denon receiver. By default, he wants to be able to talk to the Echo at any time and have its audio come out of his home theater speakers that are connected to his Denon. So would that mean he has to leave the Denon powered on all the time? Would that be any sort of a problem? Yes and no.
I mean, clearly you will be using a little bit more electricity than when you were putting it into standby when not in use. But yeah, I mean, in order to be able to talk to the Echo at any time and hear its response out of your home theater speakers, your Denon has to be on. That's just the case. It's fine to leave it on. It'll continue to function. You'll use a little bit more electricity than you were before. At idle, it's not too much. What is it, like 6 watts it uses at idle? It's on but not playing anything. So, but that's more than the 0.3 watts it uses in standby or whatever the number is. So
When he's watching TV, he doesn't want the echo to interrupt. Good luck. He can already integrate an echo with his Denon receiver via HEOS, but then anytime the echo wakes up, it automatically switches the audio input, which interrupts his TV viewing. So he's thinking just an analog audio connection directly to the echo should avoid this, right?
Yeah, if it's just to one of the analog left-right inputs, you would have to select those analog left-right inputs to then hear the echo.
This does mean that basically every time you are done, it's you're going to have to switch to that input.
You're going to have to switch back to the echo's left-right analog input. Right. Yeah, and since he will no longer be powering the Denon off, well, that's actually, I think it's his very next question, is what to do with Harmony, yeah.
So he uses a Harmony remote. So will he be able to program it so that when he is watching TV, the audio remains on the TV's audio, but when he turns the TV off, the audio goes to the echo's output every time? What you will have to do is basically kind of what we were talking about with the other guy, which is at the end of every activity, whatever. No, that doesn't work.
No, because
you have to have it be as part of the power off.
But so there is that power button on all the Harmony remotes, which all it ever does is turn everything off. Now you can have it so that it will not power off your Denon, because if you go into the Denon device within your Harmony, you can choose within its power options, never turn this device off. That is one of the options. And then even when you press that turn everything off button, the Denon won't power off. That's okay. But you can't tell the power everything off command to choose an input on a device before it powers everything off. So
what you would have to do is you would power everything off and then have a separate activity, which is echo, and then hit that.
Yeah, I guess
that's the easiest way.
Yeah, by default, it won't be controlling anything at that point.
Right.
The Harmony remote I'm talking about.
So basically, you power like at your very end, and you could just do this instead of powering off. Just hit echo instead of off.
That's right.
And it should power down everything except for the Denon.
Right.
And switch the Denon to the thing.
Right.
And so that you never use the power off button, you use the echo button.
That's right. Yeah. Instead, because when you switch between activities, it automatically powers off any devices that aren't needed for the activity you just pressed.
Right.
So you'll just have to get used to not pressing that power everything off button anymore.
Or if after you press it, you have to wait like 3 seconds and
you
then
have to wait a little bit and press the echo button. Yeah. So you create an activity that only turns on the Denon and switches the Denon to the analog input that the echo is plugged into, and then it will automatically be powering everything else off that isn't part of that activity.
And then what you do is you label that button off.
That's right.
On your Harmony remote.
That's right.
And then you tell your family this other button doesn't work anymore.
This
you have
little
to press
button at
this
the top,
one.
We don't
that doesn't work anymore. That'll turn everything off, but it does it wrong.
This is bringing me shades of Ben Drawbaugh, because he always used to complain. He used to be part of the Engadget HD podcast when that was still around, and his major thing was like, how come I can't program the power off button on Harmonies? And I would tweet back at him. I'm like, it's one button out of dozens. You can make it so that every button on the touchpad, so that if you're worried about doing it by feel, you literally just mash your hand into the touchpad anywhere and it'll do the same. Like, there were so many ways around it, and yet this is the one case where it's like, nope, you can't reprogram that power off button to do anything different. There you go. Ben Drawbaugh has turned out to be right.
So he says, lastly, is there some kind of standby pass-through that would make it so we could just press the Harmonies off button, but the echo will still play through? No, there's not.
We just
we just told you what to do. So do that.
All right.
We're getting to the point where I'm done. So this question, and then we're it. I'm sorry. You're going to be mad, but don't care.
No, that's what we did. Okay, we put a good dent in it.
Mustafa. Okay, again on Harmony remotes. Dude, what does it do with Harmony remotes at the end of this thing? On Harmony remotes, there are hard buttons for menu info, a bunch of other stuff. Sometimes you'll press say menu when you want to bring up the settings options for your TV, but instead it will open the menu on your cable box or whatever player you're using. Or maybe you press the info because you want to see the audio signal being sent to your AV receiver, but it brings up the TV's info screen instead. How do you make it so these buttons bring up the settings that you want? Well, if you make them basically, if you are changing your mind on what you want the info to do on the fly, it doesn't read your mind. It's never gonna
That's
do
right.
that.
Yeah.
But you can tell it, I want the play buttons and stuff like that to control this device during playback. when I'm on this activity. You can change those things so that the info button, instead of controlling the info on your cable box, controls the info. Like for me, info on my receiver tells me what speakers are going to be used and a bunch of other stuff. And I often like to see that. So you can change those things.
Yeah, it's so I mean what we're getting at is that so you're going to set up a Harmony activity, so you're going to have a watch TV activity, use Blu-ray player activity, whatever those are. But
Go on.
Yeah. The hard buttons on the remote, like info and menu and that, they will within that activity only send one command. So you can say, okay, I have this one info button, but do I want to bring up info on my AV receiver? Do I want to bring up info on my actual television? Or do I want to bring up the info screen from my player, my cable box or whatever?
Right.
And you can only select one of those as what that button does within that activity. So really, to have what you want, which is to be able to say, okay, right now I'm in this activity. I'm in my watch TV activity. I want to press info and see the info on my TV screen. Now I want to press info and see the info from my cable box. Because you might, maybe, like you're saying, sometimes you want to see what speakers are playing. That would be the info on your AV receiver. But other times you might want to press info and have that
pick
be
another
the cable
button
box.
and assign it to that. I mean,
well, if you got the touch screen up top or, the screen with the buttons, I would have one that's just labeled receiver info, TV info, cable box info, or the info button is always mapped to the player, let's say. And then I would have receiver info and TV info as two of my programmable buttons on the touch screen.
I have yet to have gotten a single activity that uses every single hard button on that.
No, but they're not going to be labeled the right thing. You have to
They
remember
won't be.
that.
You would have to remember that.
Somebody
but
else
you are
picking
sitting
it up.
Who cares what other people do? They're not pressing that button.
They probably aren't pressing it, but they might be pressing guide or menu or something, right?
That's right. You leave those alone. You leave the ones that make sense to people, guide and exit and menu and stuff like that. You leave those alone.
I mean, exit is another good one, right? Sometimes you are changing something on the television itself. You go to press exit and it's exiting out of your cable box because that's what exit has been set up to do. So if you're doing this scenario where you have three different devices like player, AV receiver, and television, and you want to have exit, info, menu for all three of those, you will have to make it so that you're using the programmable touch screen or, the buttons that are beside the screen, the ones that you can program, what they call soft buttons, right? You can make them whatever you want. You'll just have to label some of those. So you'll have like receiver info, receiver exit, television info, television exit, and then the actual hard buttons could be for your player. So you'll have to set that up manually in the Harmony setup software and label some soft buttons for yourself. You can't have the single actual hard button do three different things and contextually know which one you want. That is not possible.
All right, let's answer Ted's real quick.
Okay.
It's short.
If you
can get away with it, Ted asks, is it desirable to completely black out your front wall with black velvet? Will that increase the sensation of the image that the image is almost 3D if you're using an OLED? No. I mean, it's just you have no visual distraction from anything in front of you, right? It's just black. Man, I just boggles my mind that so many people have so many distractions in their lives that they can't watch the brightest thing in the room and get lost in it. Like I watched it and I'm like, I get lost in these things, and you people are like, oh my God, I can see my gray wall.
The OLEDs do have a very skinny bezel. There's very, very little bezel around that. Now you're making your whole front wall a bezel.
Dude, okay, it's an OLED. If it doesn't look 3D to you already, I don't think...
Well, it does. He was wondering, can it look even more by just... the front wall is just black velvet.
I don't know, dude. Basically, you can make yourself believe anything. Does that make sense? I guess. I don't know.
Theoretically, your whole room being black velvet and there being nothing reflective is always the theoretical ideal.
Okay, do not let your children or wife in there anymore. Put your head in the vise.
That's
and
right.
Have like your eyes, open with like little things to grab your eyelids, and then like an automatic drip thing for eye drops to keep your eyes hydrated, so you won't miss a frame. And then it's going to look the best.
You're going to want to get the whites of your eyes dyed black, because they'll reflect.
If you can get away with it, it's desirable to completely black out your front wall with black velvet. Desirable? Somebody desires it. Is it going to make any sort of real significant difference in your viewing experience? My answer is no. Rob is going to say,
distraction. I say go for it. Whatever. I say go for it. Black velvet front wall. You do it behind a projector or on either side of a projector.
Whatever, dude. So
visual distraction.
where's he going to buy this stuff from? I'd say buy it from the cheapest place you can find. To be
Yeah.
honest with you.
If you just
It
want to
doesn't
order
have
online,
to be velvet. At this point,
Whoa.
it's just going to have to be black.
Yeah, but what if it's reflecting some light from something? You just want it to be a black hole. Seymour AV, they sell Fidelio Black Velvet, which is the blackest black velvet there is. It absorbs like 99.8% of light. It's about as black as it gets. But they sell it, the rolls are only 44 inches wide, and what is it, like $13 per linear foot of that width?
Oh, that sounds reasonable.
Something
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
only going to take you like $1,000 to do the front of your room or whatever.
It shouldn't be quite that much, but so that's the whole hog one. If you want to go nuts, that's the Fidelio Black Velvet. But they do.
You already crossed in the nuts when you talked about velveting the front of your room.
$12 a linear foot, but it's only 44 inches wide. But they do, because it's only 44 inches wide and $12 a linear foot, they have baritone black velvet, which is like absorbs like 98% of light. It's not quite as black.
Ooh, it might reflect
Fidelio.
something.
Might be a little bit. If you are J.J. Abrams and you're shining a flashlight from the side of the room, it might not be 100% black up there. Baritone black velvet. It comes in a 60-inch wide bolt.
I think
and
J.J. Abrams does that when he talks to
$10
people.
a linear
He
foot.
likes to sit with a flashlight on his shoulder. He's like,
well, when he's listening to someone else's conversation, he's off to the side shining a flashlight in their eyes.
oh my god.
him and Michael Bay. It's,
Then Michael Bay's like, he's always talking from below people, looking up at them
with a flashlight,
circling around them. No, Abrams got to be behind them with the flashlight. Don't be ridiculous. Come on, Rob.
Yeah.
Abrams is behind with the flashlights, the halo effect, and then Michael Bay is crawling around the floor, looking up their nostrils the entire time, and then he explodes them.
Oh yes.
All right. So who we got left?
Alrighty, let's get back to that list there. We have on our list Daniel W, Infinite Gary, Jim B, and Adam M. You will be answered next week, gentlemen.
Sure it's not Adam W, because that'd be awesome if it was Adam West. He's still alive, right?
He is not. He passed away.
Dang it.
Year and a half, 2 years ago? No, I don't know. Time always flies, and then I don't know how long it is. But no,
that's
not Adam West.
Sorry, Adam.
Or Adam Wee. Remember that was the Family Guy? Adam Wee.
I don't know who that is. All right. To get this is AV Rant, so get your questions in. To get questions in, email us at question@avrant.com. Those of you, did I mention the book stuff last week on the podcast?
You mentioned briefly that Touch of Pain, that you were re-editing it. That was mentioned.
It is that re-edits are complete. My wife is currently reading it, and then Teresa will read afterwards. You've already read it. Not
the re-edited version, but I haven't been very much help at all in the past.
You have not.
Years.
You have. I have made a terrible mistake by letting you be on this podcast, because now my editing. So whatever. So that one's almost done. Basically, Tanel's reading it, my wife, and then my friend Teresa is going to read it next, and then that's pretty much it. It's going.
All right.
I'm done with it. I think it's good enough. Bob, I edited all of Bob since like Thursday.
Be Bob 4.
Bob 4. Yeah. I don't think, did I ever reveal the name of that thing?
Not officially, because you weren't certain the last time I heard.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever really integrated the name of the book into the book at any point. Maybe I should think about that.
Is it thematic at least? You don't have to have a character say the name like some stupid movie.
Oh, there has not been a Bob book where he does not say he's no hero. He says it in every single book, multiple times usually. So, yeah, I don't remember. Hostile Territory never really had that in there.
Nobody said, what is this, some kind of hostile territory?
No, but
Desperate Times.
Desperate Times was definitely in there. So anyways, I'm working on books. For those of you that care about such things, I've lit a fire underneath myself, and things are popping along. I'm very excited about it.
Very nice.
Look forward to that. For the rest of you, question@avrant.com. Get us your questions in here. Let's thank our listeners of the week. We've got Tyler, Joseph, and Daniel, who went to www.avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sent us a PayPal donation.
Yeah, Tyler, Joseph, Daniel, thank you very much for those donations.
And to our 84 patrons over at patreon.com, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up for a voluntary subscription, you can think of it that way. 84 patrons over there. We thank you very much for the support.
And then lastly, Fred, who talked us up to SVS yet again and said some good words about SVS as well. So thank you, Fred.
Yeah, Fred, we appreciate that. Always good to keep up good relations, and congrats on your purchases.
All right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something